Welcome to On the Rec Yard, Women's Prison Podcast, where we are live on the rec yard every Wednesday night. Hey, Toonche! We were
Golly.
in the studio a few minutes early and we were talking, and right as I hit the live button is when you want to bring up the fact that we don't have a background.
Well, it didn't occur to me. I mean, there was just blackness behind us, and I was like, something feels off.
It was off, and this is
Yeah.
better because we are actually on the rec yard. This
We
is
are.
this
Yeah.
is the visual.
We're not
So,
floating in the ether out in.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, it is Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. We are on the Rec Yard Women's Prison Podcast. I'm Marci Marie.
I'm Toonche.
It's so good to see you tonight, Toonche.
I know. And my hair's looking good this evening. I'm really impressed with myself right now.
I hadn't noticed. What I did notice is you frantically trying to fix it up before we went live. So,
Well, it does this thing where it parts right here and it'll kind of look like a butt.
well,
And so I just didn't want that to happen. We got a lot of great fans that listen, but they also, had several people tell me how handsome I am, and I'm not going to
oh
let
my
them down
gosh.
there.
Well, let's talk about first of all, Emily put a notice on here early that she was going to be here. So thanks so much for that. We appreciate you. I see Rayanne, and she made it on time. So we're so happy to see you. We have some folks watching from Facebook, and I have something new. It's a little jazz. It's a little
Okay.
jazzy. So
Let's jazz it up.
let's see if I can do it. Are you ready for this?
I am ready.
Brace yourself.
Okay.
Hey, Toonche, let's do a weekly recap.
I'm so proud of you.
That's yeah.
That was good. I liked it. It was sudden. It's kind of startled me.
Did it scare you? It wasn't supposed to scare
Doesn't-
anybody.
No, it was startling. It's you got it. It's perfect. I love it.
Well, we need to talk about what's been happening because they're asking how your trip to Houston was. So that does not have to do with women's prisons, but it has to do with life after prison. So go for it.
Yeah, so me and Mandy went to Houston, and we went to the Horror Movie Festival. Took a lot of great pictures with Jason, Michael, a whole bunch of Ghostface. Met Danielle Harris. She was on Halloween 4 and 5. Met Heather Matzo. She was in Scream 3, 5, a whole bunch of other sweet ladies. OMG. Adrienne Barbeau, if there's anyone here our age, you may remember the Swamp Thing. She was great. She was so sweet. Everybody was so much fun. There was an after party. It was kind of like this glow stick party. And yeah, it happened. It did happen. You know what that was, Marci?
What?
That I asked the DJ who was playing heavy metal and house mixes to play Taylor Swift.
Here we
I did.
go.
Sure
did he play it? Did he
said
play
absolutely. He said towards the end of the evening, and he played "Shake It Off," and the whole place erupted. There were a lot of girls that were dressed as dead Barbies. There were a lot of people jamming out to Taylor Swift at a horror movie after party. So
I love that you got to hear Taylor. That added a little bit of jazz to your horror weekend, right? So while you were having a little downtime and fun time in Houston, let's see. We had a candlelight vigil in front of the governor's mansion, and that was hosted by Be Frank for Justice, which is a nonprofit out of Austin. And it was pretty powerful. They had a couple really good speakers. Tona Southards, and I can't remember her second last name, and I'm sorry, Tona. She spoke, and she lost her son. He was cooked alive inside of a Texas prison on the Estelle unit. So she spoke, and it was just good community. It was a great turnout. That was my night to be on the prison show, the radio show out of Houston, which there are lots of prisons that pick up that station. So we were able to give some words of encouragement and hope to the folks on the inside. So that was nice. What else this week?
What else this week? What else? Gosh, it feels like, again, so many media interviews about the heat, about the mailroom changes. I did get the most recent contract for Securus, which is interesting, Marcy. It ended August 1st, but they're still operating. So there has to be another contract, unless I'm misunderstanding something. So that was an interesting thing uh, that I did this week. And yes, great news about Belinda Ramirez. Many of us know Belinda. She's done over 30 years. We were able to help some ladies that work at UT get her sentencing stuff straightened out. Marcy, they were telling this woman, "You've got stacked life sentences." Now, she was incarcerated when she was 18. Kid. She was a kid, running with a gang, and took the fall for the guys. And she was like, "No, I don't. I have concurrent sentences." And they were like, "No, it's stacked. So you just did 20 years because she got several set offs. Now you get to start on another 15 years." And she just was devastated. So we've been working on that. And Helen was able to talk to the district attorney, and they straightened it out. And guess what? TDCJ was like, "I don't care." "I don't care. You're gonna have to file another order." So we had to jump through all these hoops, and we were able to find her some parole representation. She's a staple. She's the Orange is New Orange is the New Black. Red, the character Red. That's
Hmm.
Belinda. That's Belinda in every sense of the word. So we all love her, and we're just really excited about the possibility that she might actually, hopefully, come home.
That's amazing. I was so excited to see that. That was big news and reason for celebration, and also scary that that kind of thing can happen in the system. I mean, it's literally your paperwork, whatever's on
Yeah.
your paperwork. My girlfriend Brittany, she went in and they had misspelled her name, and she's not the only person. Kanita Butler, they misspelled her name as well, and that was it. There was no, she got her ID and was like, "Hey, this is wrong." And they're like, "Sorry, it's in the system." And that was the first time she went to prison when she was a kid. And when she went back, it was still that same name. They
Hmm.
would not change it in the
God.
system. And so it's really crazy. Like, "Hey, I'm here. Obviously this is me." But
Well,
yeah.
it's scary too. It's like, she knew that she was right about her sentencing, which it was really all of it, all of her paper court stuff was just terribly, it was just terrible. And had she not had outside support, Belinda would have just, "Oh well, you're going to die there, and you've got another 15 years before you see parole." So we talk about that a lot, about the difference between y- the huge difference it makes when you have loved ones on the outside that advocate for you. And I think that's what drives us to advocate for everybody. Um, is that without it, you just get awashed into the system, even when you're right.
Even when you're right. That's exactly right. Even when you've done every your due diligence, once it's in there, and you're right, if you don't have that outside support, that's crucial.
Hmm. For sure.
So tonight we are talking about animals in the penitentiary. And I don't mean like animals like me and Toonch. I mean
Right.
like critters, four-legged critters and other kind of critters. We're talking about all the different kind of animal programs that the prisons have, animals that we came across, and also pets that we kept and we saw other ladies keeping in the dorm. So it's kind of a fun topic. And our friend Lauren Johnson recommended that we talk about this a while back. And so I'm excited to talk about something a little lighter. We've had some pretty heavy subjects. It's kind of hard for us to stay lighthearted when there's so much going on and we're in the middle of this heat wave in Texas. So, with all of our emotional and mental and physical work that we're putting in to bring change there, we needed a break tonight. And we're so glad that y'all are with us, hanging out with us, and make sure and I'm supposed to say this at the beginning, and I keep forgetting, Toonche. We're gonna have to set some kind of reminder. But I need you guys to thank you for being here. So please hit that like button, comment. If you're watching us live right now, please share this when the live is over. And if you guys are listening to us wherever you hear your favorite podcasts at, please leave us a review. That helps our podcast reach a larger audience, and we would sure appreciate that. So, Toonche, just tell off the top of your head the first thing that came to your mind when you knew we were talking about pets, prison pets, or animals in prison.
Well, for sure, it's the cats. I mean, I am a cat lady, but it was the cats. Every unit I've ever been on, there are a lot of cats. There's, some units like Riverside, it was like this big deal, don't touch them. And they were very scared and very, very stray and wild. We'd put the tuna out for them. And every once in a while, I remember Charlie, if she's watching, there was one little kitten that would come on the rec yard. And I would get so excited, Marcy. It was one of the first things I wanted when I got out was a cat. I grew up with cats. So it came to us and we were sitting, in our little spot, I almost said something else, our little spot. Okay. And it came over and I had my key on my chain and I was kind of doing this and she took it and put it on the cat's neck and it ran off. And so I was like, it's going to dart. I was freaking out. And I am so anal retentive. I'm like, can't believe you did that. And she's like, you need to calm down. It's funny. But he could have got away with my key and then I'd have been locked out of my box. But
well, that's it, Toonche. Not everybody knows why someone in prison would have a key. And so we needed to let them know that we had like a metal lock box, a metal locker. It was attached to the bottom of our metal bunk. And that's where we would keep our commissary purchased items or any of our personal items, our mail, family photos, everything like that. And you could purchase a lock with a key for like $12 is what it was, I think, the last time I bought one. And that's what you kept. You kept your key with you. So if you got locked out of that sucker,
you're screwed. Maybe the lieutenant will come by and open it with their key, or they'll have to get someone to bust it off. But I was freaking out. But that unit, the cats were kind of more stray and skittish. At Mountain View, our warden for many years was just a lovely woman and really shaped the whole atmosphere at the unit. But she let maintenance build little cat houses and they were lined up behind H-Storm and it was a thing that they took them, they got them, spayed and neutered and got their little shots or whatever and brought them back to the unit. And those cats would come sit in your lap. Commissary was outside and people just pick them up and carry them. Like it just was a thing. And I know that when Diane sees this, she'll remember that H-Storm was the cat place. That's where all the cats went. And Michelle one time hid a kitten in her commissary bag. I said, what'd you do with the kitten? She's like, it's right here. And it was like squished in between her chips, just like this.
That reminds me of those little cat tote bags that people have. And there's all kinds of really cute ones that are like chest packs that are all these characters, and then the cat puts their face through so it looks like they're a cat with maybe a leprechaun body or something. But this little cat in the commissary box and in the commissary bag. Well, my friend Cher Marie is on Mountain View unit and she has a pet cat there. She buys mackerel and feeds the cat mackerel every day from the store. And our good friend Peaches is on right now. She's watching from Facebook, and she talks to Skylar, which is Angela Roca. And she's an old school. She's done a lot of time, and she has two baby kittens right now. So kittens, that's definitely one. And my son, he is a big animal guy,
Mhm.
especially with cats. He does a lot of trap and release programs to get them spayed and neutered, and uh, rehomes a lot. And he's always asking me now, how many cats were there? Well, now how many? What did I? And I'm like, trust me, those cats are getting fed.
Yeah, yeah. They're getting fed, and they served a purpose too, not just for love and affection, but like Albert says, yes, cats help reduce the rat population, and our rat problem again. Mountain View was a much cleaner, well maintenance unit, but we didn't have that big of a rat problem as we did like at Crane. It was horrible. We had rats everywhere. um, but I will tell you kind of a funny story about feeding mackerel, because our officers let us do that, right? Well, one person, Callie, she was one of the cat people, right? She's obsessed with them. And she lived across from me, Marcy. And so she's collecting everybody's mackerel juice.
Oh,
Okay. And we're not just for because she would pour it on noodles when we didn't have any food. She'd pour it on noodles so they'd eat that. Okay, well, Callie was keeping this in a peanut butter jar for days. Nobody knew. Why are you doing this? And she accidentally knocked it over.
oh no.
The whole dorm smelled like death and dirty Pampers. It was horrible. So Callie got in trouble for that. You don't keep the mackerel juice. You pour it out the window for the kitties right then.
Yeah, no, that's not good. And anybody who has prison, the dorm already kind of stinks
Yeah.
anyway. So I can only imagine that mackerel juice everywhere.
Honey,
It,
it lit it up. And it was across from me, and I cussed her ass out. What are you thinking? She's like, I just wanted to stretch it.
so Tona, we weren't really allowed to have cats, but there were stray cats everywhere. And so that's kind of what we're talking about. We were most like the rules where I was at, we weren't really allowed to even touch them or feed them, but we did because there are a lot more people in prison than there are staff members watching over
Right.
us. So we still did. And there were times when, just like you were talking about, Toonch, your friend had that kitten in the commissary bag and smuggled it back in. We definitely had people smuggle those back in. Or if you lived in cell block, and especially on the bottom, on the first row, one row, then you could open your window and kind of train the cat to come in, because you would start with putting food on your windowsill and then moving it a little in and moving a little in. And before you know it, you have a cat that's going in and out of your cell. So yeah, yeah, that happened. We had, let's talk about rats, because yeah,
Yeah.
there's cats keep down the mice population,
But you
but
still have folks that they love their little. Now, you get them when they're babies, right? And we'd make little houses for them. We'd make little stuff. I remember the last time I was at Riverside, again, the place where there was a lot of rats. I know Hobby, they had a lot of pet rats. And the girls were like, "Look," they would keep them in their bra. And so they're not mice, they're rats. And there's a difference. Or they
they
would
are
keep them.
mice.
Honey, this was a rat. And I'm going to tell you how you know the difference is their snout. So, yes, there are some little mice, little field mice, and they make the little sock for a little bed, put in their, right here in their boobs, and they pack them around. It's contraband, like you do anything else. But these girls were like in Riverside, them were swamp rats. And look, I said, ugh. I said, that's a baby rat. And they were like, it's a little mouse. I said, it's a rat. Do you see its feet? Do you see its snout? And so when it started to get bigger, they were like, I think it's a rat because its tail was thicker. And I remember one that we found in the maintenance shop. Literally, I'm not kidding y'all, was this big. Those are river rats. Huge. I love Mama Kitty. I loved Mama Kitty very much.
Katie's commenting, I remember holding Mama Kitty while waiting in the commissary line at Mountain View, her little raspy meow.
Uh-huh.
So that was a famous cat on your unit or what?
Yeah, and this is how she'd meow. She moved real slow like an old lady. And so she would just come in, in the wintertime, we'd be out there cold. We got to sit on a bench. I'm sorry. Please don't cuss me out. But we had a bench. So we would sit there and Mama Kitty would just sit in your lap. And then she'd get out and get in the next person and just warm everyone.
Well, that would not have happened where I was because number
I
one, we
know.
weren't sitting on any bench
I
outside
know.
the commissary line and we weren't covered. You guys had coverage. If it was raining, we were standing out there getting
In the
rained
rain.
on. And every now and then some nice correctional officer would come by and say, y'all get under the awning, and we could get up on the building, but not always. There were times when we would just be standing out there in the rain with our commissary bag. Jerry says cats, mice, skunks, birds, and scorpions. And I never saw anybody with a pet scorpion, but I did have a couple of skunks that I used to feed out my window in cell block because they were twins,
Yeah,
Toonchi.
they're
They were
cuties.
two little baby twin skunks, and they would come out at night, and I'd be laying in my bunk, and I mean, they kept me entertained for months, and I would feed them out of my window. So, yeah.
Oh, we had some skunks that would get in the little not the mice, the cat's house, and they would sleep together. And I'm like, y'all, this makes me so nervous. We need to make sure the cats have rabies shots.
um, yeah, those cats and skunks, they get along. They really do. We go outside sometimes. I keep cat food in the garage and I keep the garage cracked just because my two cats, sometimes they'll run off and be gone for a whole day and I worry that they don't have food or water. But there have been times when I go out there. In fact, one night in particular, I went out to go to the garage and look through the window and there was a cat, a skunk, and a raccoon all eating out of the cat bowl at once. I was like, "Oh, this is a little too much." So, side note that's away from prison pet and prison animal talk is our friend Andrea. She says she just got off with the phone with some of the girls on the Dr. Lane Murray unit, and they saw Toonchi on the Waco News tonight talking about the dangerous temperatures inside of the Texas prison. So good job,
Yes,
Tooch.
yes,
And
good. They saw that we're having and we'll talk towards the end a little bit more about it. But yes, we're having a prayer vigil in Gatesville, Texas, Saturday evening. So, Marcy will be talking to some more Central Texas media tomorrow to make sure the men and women on the inside know that we will be there in their community. Um, Holding space for everything that they're going through. So I'm so happy the girls saw it. That was the whole point.
yes, yes, I'm so happy. And that reporter said he was going to try to get it on tonight, and I'm so
Yeah,
glad he
he
did.
did.
So that was awesome. So what other? Oh, well, we have to talk about. I want to talk about the Patriot Pause program just briefly because we did get to see some dogs while we were
Mhm,
incarcerated. There were dogs living on the Dr. Lane Murray unit, and it's part of a program where they're raising dogs for disabled veterans. They're
mhm.
training them, and I don't know how effective that program is. I've never been a part of that program, so I hate to speak on it, except I just know I know some ladies that spent a lot of years in that program that said it's not. There's a lot of, like everything else, I guess, in our system, there's a lot of things that need fixed in it. But
Right.
the plus side is we did have dogs, and so
Yes.
I was in college with one of the girls from the Patriot Paws program, and she brought her dog to school, and so that's how I got to love on that dog because we walking down Main Street and all that, going to and from chow, it's not like you could stop. We weren't allowed to stop. We weren't allowed to talk and pet the dog. That wasn't an option. But in the college class, our college professor, he went by a different set of rules.
Right, right, yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I remember that too. I had my, when I got there for the second stint, somebody had we were doing college at Lane Murray, and somebody came in with one of the dogs, and I was like, oh my god, I haven't seen a dog in like 2 or 3 years at that point. But yeah, we weren't supposed to pet them, and they live with their trainer in the cell. Like they made special dorms just for them to stay with the dogs. And I should have thought about it. We could have had Mandy or somebody on who had been in the dog program to talk about it a little bit more. Because you're right. Like, again, so many pluses and so many cons.
Right. We used to the dog dorm on the Dr. Lane Murray unit was like a gym. They had quite a bit of room. It was like a small gym where they had all kinds of things for the dogs, and then they had it was their setup was really clean
Yeah.
compared to our living quarters. So it was good for those girls for sure. So and then I was also wanted to talk about, well, we have dogs that are trained, the canines, the men.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Hey, now, and let me say this. What I always found weird is, first of all, you can't rely on those dogs. They would sniff out stuff and it would just be completely wrong. People get sent to seg, their dorm, the dorm and their beds tore. There's nothing there. Um, and sometimes I've watched those guys when they use those little treats or the little actual little bit of whatever they train them with, they would leave them. But what it always bothered me, Marcy, is that those dogs never looked cared for. They always had like mange looking scraps. They did not look well cared for.
I agree. They looked rough, and
Mhm.
you're right. And there was towards the end of my sentence, well, the last 3 or 4 years, there was an officer that went from our unit into training the dogs, and she was a dog person, and that's why she went over there. And I felt like, and it might have just been my perception, but I felt like they were healthier when she was a part of that program, because all of a sudden they seemed a lot healthier looking and healthier acting. But we weren't supposed to touch those dogs really. They did come in. They weren't, it's just correction staff that were training them. And so
Mhm.
they had been trained to learn how to train, and it was a semi professionally trained drug sniffing dog.
Right.
And they were not always effective.
No. And you lived in fear that this dog is going to come in here and sniff and find something. They're going to take you. And then maybe a day later they'll sort it out. But no, and they just didn't look well cared for. Now, the dogs that in the dog program that the ladies took care of were always clean and well groomed, and which was hard for them, Marcy, because they train to a certain point and then the dog is passed off to someone else. Like, they're not supposed to treat them like a pet. They're training them. And I could imagine that being not always easy to be separated.
Well, when you're anytime, right? Even out here, and you have a dog living with you for 2 years, because that's how long the training program is, and you're sleeping with the dog, and your dog is going with you everywhere, to meals, to school, to everywhere, and then you just have to pass it off. Even out here in the free world, that would be hard. But if you're incarcerated, you have that loneliness about you, or that longing for connection, and even in a pet, which is why there are so many pets, right? um yeah, that's something that could be hard for sure.
So we've got cats and dogs and mice. Let's talk about birds.
Okay.
Did y'all ever have any birds?
I knew somebody, and I'll put her out there, Lisa Stevens. She's home, and if she's not watching now, she usually watches at some point. But she had a bird that was injured in some way.
Okay.
And you know what? It might have been a bat.
Oh God.
It might have been
Oh
a
Lord.
bat, girl. It might have been. So, do you remember those toolboxes? They
Uh,
were called a gender box, and what it was is TDCJ realized that policy says everything we own has to be in our box. Every personal items have to be in our box, and women have more personal items because at that time we had, of course, feminine hygiene products, and then we had a curling iron available to us. We had a hair dryer available to us. So what they did, and makeup, that they didn't sell to the men. So they sold us these gender boxes, which it was just a big metal toolbox. They called it a gender box. What it was a toolbox. So Lisa kept this critter in the toolbox, in the gender box.
God.
I'm it was a bat. We're just going to say it was a bat. Lisa, you better comment if it wasn't, but I'm pretty sure it was a bat. And if it wasn't that time that it was a bat, it was another time. So yeah, but he was injured in some way. And so that was a big deal. And at some point, I don't know if Lisa's roommate ran her in, but the
God.
laws went in. The laws went in and
To
got,
get the baby bat.
yes. Yep, that happened. And birds were, y'all, I have never seen more pigeons in my entire life, including movies like whatever that bird movie, Stephen King bird movie. That's how I felt we were living, right?
They were nasty. They were nasty. At Plain State, the birds would be in the chow hall because it's almost outside, and they would be all up the top there. Now I did have a friend that had a baby bird. We called the bird Contra for contraband. Nursed it. She kept it like the mice, right? She loved that bird. Oh, Marcy. She takes the bird with her to work. She worked on the yard with me, but her friend was in the boiler room, so she'd give it to her to watch. And we could walk really freely up to the boiler room at Riverside. And remember, the cats are there, but they're hiding and slinking and not letting people pet. They just come and nibble some tuna if you throw out. Well, we put the bird on the ground to give it some water and to pet it. And we were just, oh, that cat came out of nowhere, nowhere. And my friend Rosacita, her name was Rosacita, she goes, no. Cat was gone with Contra. Now, the only other time anybody had a bird was in Four Dorm before it became the dog program. And they had that bird in there. And I said, look, y'all, we've had bad experiences with baby birds. And I have another bird story, but that's for another topic. But I said, y'all get that out of the dorm. And they're like, no, we love it. And so it's like this on her finger. Okay, well, you remember those fans in the wall that they would turn on for the outside air?
Mm-hmm.
And so it started flying around in the day room. And I said, get the bird. And it got near that thing and it sucked it. And it said, and all you saw was feathers. I said, I can't do this with y'all.
Oh my
Birds are not my
gosh.
thing, but y'all need to get a mouse or I used to keep bugs sometimes as pets, especially in jail. But the birds just, it didn't go well, Marcy. It didn't go well.
The birds, people in cell block, we fed the pigeons. So let me just start with that. You would be walking back from chow and in line, like we would have to be in line, one in front of the other. And the person in front of you might have smuggled back some bread that they broke up in their pocket. And we'd be walking along and they'd throw the bread out for the pigeons. And the pigeons would just whoosh, come down 10, 12, 15, 18, 50 pigeons at once. And it used to make me so angry, like you're throwing it, but you're walking on.
Yeah, right.
I'm behind you. And it's horrible. Like you have to pay attention to these things, who's around you, because if you're around a pigeon feeder, it's not a good thing. But in cell block, you would feed them out your window. So
Mhm.
especially if you are in solitary confinement, which restrictive housing, which whatever pretty name they want to put on it, it's solitary confinement. Especially if you're there because your dinner trays, your food trays come to your door, so now you have food there that is not that edible.
Mhm.
And you would throw your extra food out the window for these pigeons. But those folks, they would, just like with the cat, they would put a little food on their windowsill and they'd just sit real still and watch, like just wait for a pigeon to come. And then but they would want them in their cell sometimes. I don't know.
Well, it was so comforting when you had there's something so wonderful about pets, you know? And uh, I remember, Marcy, I kept bugs.
Bugs.
Yeah, I kept bugs, ants, and spiders. Now, when I say I kept them, they had a hole or a little nest or something in the brick wall or in my cell that I would feed them. There was this little spider to this day it kills me that he had a little I was laying on my bunk and I was just staring at the cubicle wall and it's those brick, the red brick, right? And in the crack, there was this tiny little spider that would come out sometimes. And I would just lay there for hours and watch him. I named him, I talked to him, and then he died. And I felt really, was so devastated because that was my company in that cubicle. When I would feel sad, I would just go sit and stare at the spider.
It was Charlotte.
I guess so. Ants, I mean, because you watch them, it's like, your inner life when you are, and I had kind of this discussion today of like so many things that you learn about yourself that I learned how to not be bored. I learned how to not to ignore restlessness, or I learned how to connect to nature and animals in a way that I don't think that I would have ever done had I not been, in that situation.
Dare I say, had you not ever been there, you would not have laid down for hours and watched a spider. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
think you're right. We did have to learn how to entertain ourselves and how to, stay calm in a place that's not so calm around us, and those little critters are some of the ways. So, Angelica Reyna, she is, a former correctional officer on the Lane Murray unit. She's asking about, how do we hear from any of the ladies in the dog program now? I don't think so.
No, not currently.
Mm-mm.
But I, like I said, I wish that we'd had people that were recently released that were in the dog program on the show because I think that it's a great program. I think the petty things that go with prison and women's prison can kind of mess that up sometimes. But I think that the program's intention, and having the animals on the unit. I wish that they would allow us to, it's interesting to again mention the heat is something that Representative Sherman said, when we're talking about the heat and we've got all this inaction and nobody's wanting to do anything. I tell you what, if we gave every single incarcerated person a dog or a cat, suddenly everybody would be furious about how hot it is in there. And that's so strange. It's understandable, but what's the difference, right? So I'd love to see if we had more pets. I mean, there's so much therapy in that. I mean, people go to animal therapy out here. I mean, my cat has saved I'm not kidding you. This little cat in there has kept me from having mental health breakdowns. She's kept me from doing things because I'm not going to lie to you, Marcy. I think to myself, well, remember the last time I got locked up and all of my cats had to be adopted out and they were so frightened and scared without me. Like, I can't, who's going to take care of her? Like, I don't have children. And I just feel like it's so healing. And it's that idea that we can't be trusted, that somebody's going to hurt the animals. And I never saw anybody hurt those animals.
No, quite the opposite. If it was the staff. If something and don't get me wrong, because lots of staff members ended up adopting some of the cats and definitely, but lots were not okay with that. I want to say real quick, we're getting a few questions in the chat, and if we're going to answer those questions at the end. So don't think we're ignoring you. I see you. I appreciate the questions. You guys keep the questions coming, but if they're not related to this topic, I'm going to hit the answers. We'll handle it at the end, right? So yeah, it was definitely not. Now have you seen the programs where uh some of the jails, and I should have looked again before, they actually have a pet cat program, and it's, of course,
Hmm.
it's in a
Hmm.
men's facilities, and it's based on disciplinary. Like, you're given a cat, a pet for you to care for, and you do everything with this pet. You handle everything, care for this pet, and if you act out in some way, that's your punishment. Is your pet is taken from
Oh
you.
my God. Marcy, I would have never done, and I know you're going to say you never did anything. No, I just didn't get caught. But like the risk that I took, like just thinking about it's making my ear red. Like the risk that I did take in doing things that I wasn't supposed to, I would have never, if you'd have given me Taylor and if you said you can keep her and take her home with you, I would have never done anything. I can't imagine. Like, what a great motivation. I mean, it is kind of sad and kind of almost, um, I don't know, it kind of in some ways does feel a little grimy, but at the same time, it's like, well, it would be healing and bonding and teaching people the importance of, you know, connections, emotional bonds, and consequences, like really putting those consequences out there of, you're going to literally take her from me and she's all I have in this cell. No way.
Yeah, and that's exactly, so some of those men, in the things that I read, but they just all are just talking about, yeah, this has taught me responsibility. It's men that have been incarcerated since they were 12 and 13 years old, and
Mhm.
are now young men, and that are going to go home, without ever having this kind of experience. And yeah, it's therapy, and that's pets are therapeutic for sure. And that's what Shelly's talking about in the chat. She said, "My cats rescued me. I wouldn't be here without them." And my therapist, she helped me too. She says, yeah. So yeah, pets do. Loving something and being responsible for something outside of yourself that loves you unconditionally, that's pretty intense. And that's what pets offer. This is not about cats. This is not about cats, but I just remembered I had a play brother, Shine. Shout out to Shine. She's in Dallas right now doing well, but she had a pet that she brought in from Host Squad, brought in from work, smuggled it in, and it was a little frog.
Oh my God.
And I think our friend Frankie, shout out Frankie, she's home and doing well also. She named the frog Bocephus. So we did have a pet frog in the dorm for a while. We were in cell block, and I think for a good while. And Shine finally freed Bocephus and let Bocephus out into the wild. But we were on a mission, like as a dorm, collecting flies. And
Mhm. Mhm. Well, we had the little tiny baby frogs in when we were in the youth system, and I don't know if Tamiko's watching, but me and her, there was a plant on each one of the tables that we had our lunch at in the day room. And for some reason, I guess it was the weather outside, but we were getting flies real bad. And so the flies would sit on the plants, and the little water in the pot. So she just started bringing frogs in. And I said, well, put them in there. And so we would just sit there and watch the frogs eat all the flies on the plant.
we we used to bring in all kinds of things from Field Squad, which is crazy because the strip search coming in from Field Squad is so intense,
Right.
but but still ineffective.
It's still very ineffective.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if you throw 30 women in a room together, even if you have 3 or 4 officers, guess what? We're going to still have what we want to have on us, and we weren't putting frogs in our prison purse. And if you don't know what that is, you'll have to look it up for later. That's a conversation for another day. But I'm just saying we brought this in. But the craziest thing I have seen brought in from Field Squad, we were working up at there was like a dump. It was a bunch of old prison
Yeah.
equipment. It was a dump. Do you know, because you were
Mhm.
there in Gatesville, and so we were working up there. We're having to move stuff around, load trailers, load scrap trailers, or whatever the heck they were doing with that stuff. I don't even know, but we came across a bunch of baby snakes.
Okay.
Yes,
Diane,
girl,
close your ears. She's terrified of snakes.
snakes. This lady brought in a handful of baby snakes into back from host squad back onto the unit, and that was like a lock down the dorm type situation. I wasn't in that dorm, but I was on host squad with her, and I remember everybody was like, why are you doing that? What are you doing? Yeah. And so the consequences for that, the entire host squad got punished for that deal
Oh,
because it just made them look so bad
right.
because
Like, how did they sneak in 30 baby snakes?
right. Right.
Jiminy. Well,
Right.
I can't ever say that anyone kept them as pets, but they were certainly there. I posted that TikTok of that guy that had a snake on his fan and it wrapped its tail and it dropped and flung off. Well, it's exactly what happened at Riverside. That there was a snake that got up through the pipes to the top of the pipe chase, came down, and there's 3 showers, Marcy, and they've all got big fans over them. And that snake had wrapped around the fan and got his little tail. And I could hear it. I'll never forget. It was Juneteenth. It was the morning of Juneteenth. Everybody's asleep because it's holiday. My friend Jazz, that was sleeping 2 beds down, got up to get in the shower. And I kept hearing this ting, 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 because it was real quiet. And I was like, what is that? And baby, she come bolting out of there screaming bloody murder in it, like barely holding her towel in front of her. And it was like, or somebody fighting that snake. Once it had, I guess, hit his tail so much that he finally decided, I need to let this go. And he just dropped on top of her in the shower. Huge, gigantic. Um, it wasn't a poisonous snake, but it was big. And so they took him outside. But another girl had one in her shoe one night, and that was at Mountain View. So it's like snakes got in all the time. You never knew. They'd just be sitting there and you'd be like, oh my God.
I have had snakes in my house come in. I live out in the sticks, but during my entire prison sentence, the only snakes I came across were outside. And we would be like doing field work and we would be watching. Like I was lead row oftentimes. And so I was like the first one that was going to get bit if I let him on. So I remember actively watching for them because they were everywhere outside of the units. It makes sense that they got into the units. I can't believe I never encountered one that wasn't intentionally brought in.
Well, it's like, I mean, I think that the setup of Lane Murray, at least, with all of its faults, it was newer theoretically than Riverside. I mean, Five Dorm at Riverside is literally called the barn. I mean, it's just open, too big, open. It's horrible. It is a barn. Hilltop, you know how old that place is. Like, these are really old units that are all these nooks and crannies and just full of snakes and rats and possums. We had a possum that was living under the stairs at the education building. But them skunks running around during the day just was awfully concerning. Like, and they're like, "Oh, let's try to go feed it." I'm like, "Y'all were born in the city. I don't know, but a country girl will tell you if there's a skunk wandering around during the day, it's usually something wrong. Like it's got rabies or something. Leave it alone."
Yeah, yeah, they're nocturnal. Stay away from them during the
Right.
day for certain. Nicole says that she didn't see that many cats as she did at the hobby unit. They said the hobby unit was, and I've never been on hobby unit. My girlfriend ended her time there, so I'll have to ask her about that for sure. Yeah, I also want to talk, Toonch, about the horses.
Oh, the horses.
Yeah. So as horrific as working out in the field on the field squad or the host squad, as horrible as that is, because it is just plantation work for
Mhm,
free,
mhm.
you do have a armed guard, an armed prison guard, armed correctional officer riding around on horseback as your boss out there. So, for me, who loves horses, I absolutely loved being around the horses. And on those rare times where one of the bosses would have to get off of their horse to go do whatever they were doing, on those rare occasions that they asked me to hold the lead rope for the horse, that was like huge, because then I could pet the horse and love
Oh,
on it. And those little moments of that that was a big deal. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, the girls that the trustees that rode the horses and took care of them, like they lived for that. A lot of them never got in trouble because they didn't want to be taken away from the horses.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that and I forgot that it was females in Gatesville that took care of the horses,
Mhm.
that worked in that area. So, yeah, I wish I could remember the name of Lieutenant Warren's horse, and I can't believe I don't. But yeah, he used to run off on him sometimes. We'd be out in the field, and he their horse would he'd run off. He'd go back to the unit.
Yeah. I remember being on the field and a couple of times watching horses just decide, "Nah, I'm sick of you," and just buck them clean. I mean, flying in the sky, buck them off.
Yes, these were not, again, they were semi-professionally trained. They
Right.
were not that tame, and I always thought, these guys are riding around on horseback armed on these horses that are already skittish. And if they were to fire their firearm off the back of one of those horses, it'd have been over for all of them. And I mean, I just thought, if one person ran, everybody could just run, because
Yeah.
they're going to be out of there. Those laws are all going to be bucked off their horse. I wasn't convinced that those horses could have taken a shot.
Well, it was scary. I remember when I was at Lane Murray and I was on the back of the trailer, right? This was when we could look around. I think now everybody tucks their head or turns around or something, but we were just, and I forget his name. He was a really mean guy, but he was screaming and yelling, and the horse, he's yelling at us, and we're like, his gun in his holster, I kid you not, Marcy, was slipping out. And the horse was, and we were like, and so he's screaming at us, "Shut up, shut up." And he's making the horse angry. And we're like, "Okay, fine, then drop your gun." What do we care? I just don't want to get shot. And he dropped it. Like the horse bucked him off. And I was so close, I could hear that metal, because it was that sidewalk coming up from Hilltop to Lane Murray on the street. And for some reason, his horse, he was on the side, and I can hear that gun, that revolver hitting the ground. And he got bucked off, and he was like, "Fuck." And he's running and jumping on his gun. And we're all just sitting there, just look, there it goes. We didn't care. None of us were fixing to do.
Nobody was doing that much time that they wanted to. I used to tell myself all the time, like, I'm not gonna try to escape, because I'm not doing enough time to be thinking
Right.
about, even at a 20-year sentence, like, that wasn't enough. But I have a host squad boss story that involves his firearm. So you guys, they cannot bring their firearms onto the unit. It's a security risk for someone to be armed that where they in a place where they could be overtaken, right? If you're on horseback, you're probably not going to be assaulted by a group of incarcerated people, but in the unit that they not. So there's outside lock boxes, or this is the kind of things that they do. They don't take it on the unit. Well, we get back and they're all putting their weapons up before we go in the back gate. And one of the officers is like, I don't know. I don't know where mine is. He had
Oh
dropped it
my god.
out in the field while we were working.
OMG.
He lost it, girl. And I mean, everybody knew because we were all lined up.
Right
So it was
there,
like
like,
130 of us. They could not have covered it up because we were all right there.
did y'all
And
go on
they,
lockdown?
yeah, yeah, we went on lockdown. Yeah, we went on lockdown. They locked the unit down. The bosses wrote out, the lieutenant ended up finding it. But yeah, yeah, that's so
God.
much, so much. And it was a guy I liked. It was an officer that was just there trying to do his job. And honestly, in any other circumstance, he'd have been like, damn, and rode back and looked around. But in that setting, he didn't lose his job. He only lost his position
Mhm.
as a field boss. He
Yeah.
was still a boss. And then he ended up being a cell block officer, poor guy.
Oh gosh.
So, yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
oh man.
Well, your, your Hamster Life 254, he said he saw a field log get hit in the NUTS. I probably can say that with a metal wand and get caught with cans of tobacco. Baby, our field bosses were chewing tobacco. Our field lieutenant, all day, every day. And
They
that's
were they were in full costume for their role.
yes, and it wasn't just outside the prison gates. They were chewing it inside, and I'm telling on y'all. Y'all shouldn't be bringing that. You are not supposed to be bringing in tobacco to a prison. It's right there on the wall. There's a sign right there on the wall. Toonch, we had a few questions. I'm going to try to scroll back up through this chat. James Light, James Lee, maybe the prison system did the first female high school at the Woodman unit last year. I think it's awesome. Have you heard any info or stories from that program?
Well, I mean, it's cool that you brought that up because I believe I was at the second one, or maybe it was the first one. I did the little keynote speaking for the ladies there. It is a unique program, right? Like, this is something that we worked on with legislation last session to make sure that, you know, the kids in the adult system have access to an actual high school diploma and not just a GED, and especially kids that have special education services. There are so many federally mandated things that they get with their education that they weren't getting. So, yeah, it is at Woodman, and I believe it used to be at San Saba, but that's turned into a men's facility. I think they do it at, I'm not sure if they're doing it at Plain. I know that if you qualify for that program, they'll move you to Woodman. Even people from ID units, which is weird, right? Because Woodman is kind of a lower security, but yeah, it's a wonderful program for the kids. They were teenage. Me and Alexa talked to them twice, and they really are just kids, man.
That's awesome. I love that you know about that program, James, and I love that some of the girls are getting to participate in that, and I hope that it grows. Because those kind of programs that are really awesome, though, they need to grow, and more people need to be able to have access to them. So that's incredible. Matthew is asking, "Are you writing a book about your experience? When will it be out?" So Toonch is a writer. She
I
needs to write
am.
a book. She's an actual writer. I have 2 book deals, and I have one that coincides with a production deal, and the writers are on strike for the production deal, but that book will be released at that time. And I'm not sure about the second one yet. So yes, but not yet, right? So, and then we have this other Heather Rainwater. Toonche, this question is for you. She says, Toonche, I'm going to put it up here, but I don't know if it'll say the whole thing, so I might take it off to read it. It says, Toonche, do you have any advice for a first time terrified young woman, mentally about 13 years old, going into the TDCJ Safe P for a meth and heroin addiction? How is it best to survive and thrive in that system? I'm going to take it off the screen so I can read. She really wants to be free of that life, but prison is her biggest fear. And it's so hard for her to overcome that fear mentally.
Well, I think having being young in your mind, and especially physically being a young person in the system, um, I I think I think the biggest way that I survived and thrived was focusing on the positive things, right? And there's so few things there that are positive. Safe P, we've both been through Safe P, but for us it was called ITPC. It's depending on where it's at. You just take what you can, right? There's some of it, a lot of it's going to be just straight up BS, and like, why am I sitting here? And but there is some of it you can use, and just being there for her. I mean, I think that also was a big part of how both of us survived, was outside support. And what does that look like? That looks like listening, that looks like being emotionally available, that looks like, um, you know for my family, it was firm, clear boundaries and love. When I got home the second time, my brother was like, okay, you were a kid the first time, you're an adult now, and here's our boundaries. And I had to honor that. So finding the women that are working on the positive things as well. I think Marcy would agree to that too. Like, it's the crowd that you run with, whether it's in prison or in out here in school or in the community. You're going to start to absorb what you put yourself around. So
And I think that you said it best when you said get what you can from it, because it's going to be the program. It's maybe with good intentions, but it's going to come with a lot of things that don't pertain to her and that are going to spend hours on things that have nothing to do with anything that she even can relate to, honestly, because it's made for such a broad group of people, and so with that, um I would just say, yeah, take the information, take the nuggets that you can get and apply them, and listen to the rest, because you never know who in life you're going to encounter that you might hear something. So, Heather, best of luck to her. We are sending lots of love and strength to you and her, because we know as mom that that's hugely hard, that's hugely difficult. So much love to you and to her. Tunchi, we are past our hour, honey. And do we know what we're talking about next week? Do
what
we
are we
want to?
talking about next week, y'all?
I don't know.
Well,
I
count
don't.
hasn't cleared yet, so we've got just a minute or two before count clears, before they're going to get us off the rec yard.
Yeah,
So,
well, let's hear it. What is it? I am at a loss, and I came up with this topic, Toonch.
oh, you did. Well, let's
Yeah.
see. I well, she brings up a really good point about fear. And I think maybe if we just had an episode devoted to maybe myths of women in prison, and how that's depicted in media, and how people, carry that stereotype, maybe that would be a good episode.
I like the Mythbusters idea, and I also just like a how how to if you're
Yeah.
facing charges, how to navigate your way the best way, because I didn't do my time the easy way, so I know exactly what not to do, right?
Right.
Um,
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, I mean, maybe we could just have this where, if an episode that people can refer to and say, man, I've got a loved one that's fixing to experience incarceration, or um, I'm going to trial and I'm scared or whatever. Maybe just something that you and I could have used when we were younger to be like, okay, what can I expect? What is a myth and not true? And how do I handle certain situations? I think that would be pretty cool.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Heather says yes. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do that one. And we'll we'll get to that next week, guys. We are so happy that you guys tuned in. We are so grateful for your support, and especially the familiar faces that we see time after time. And Toonche, I got a little something for you.
Okay.
Okay, are you
Oh
ready
boy.
for
Wait a
this?
minute. Wait, let's wait. Because is it the closing music?
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
before we
it's a little closing something. Yeah.
Okay, well, I just wanted to make sure we promoted the vigil again one more
Yes.
time for anybody that wants to come and join Linus and Statewide Leadership Council. We will be in Gatesville, Texas this Saturday at 8 p.m. at Raby Park. That's downtown Gatesville. We'll be having a prayer vigil and some just community time to honor the folks who are suffering and dying in our prison system over the heat. So please join us if you can. We'd love it.
Toonche and I will both be there, and we would love to see all of your faces, anybody that can make it. And if you can't make it, please share the information, because we would definitely love to get as many people involved as we can.
Yes. Okay, now I'm ready.
Thank y'all for hanging out with us on the Rec Yard Women's Prison Podcast with Marci Marie and Toonche. Make sure and subscribe to our channels so you'll never miss a